Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Here's your host, Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon.
Welcome into the basketball podcast of Mid-America. It is March 3rd, and Arkansas is heading into the final week of the regular season. It's pretty crazy to me that we're at this point in the season. I kind of have mixed feelings about it because obviously I love this time of the year, like everybody that's listening to this probably does too. You just can't beat the drama of the NCAA tournament and even the craziness of the conference tournaments in general, but a lot of those small conference tournaments turn into some of the more memorable moments from this month. But it also means we're getting closer to the time of the year where there's not basketball. We're gonna have to try to fill the void somewhere. I think it's weird to me this point of the year compared to the last two because I don't know what this month is going to hold for Arkansas. In the last couple of years we kind of expected Arkansas to play pretty well because it had built up some momentum. I think in February they'd hardly lost a game in February the last 2 years before their Elite Eight runs, and I think there is definitely some hope that Arkansas fans are holding on to, but there's definitely some questions on everybody's mind too. Happy as always to be joined by Andrew Joseph of Whole Hog Sports and Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Real quick before we dive into Arkansas basketball, is there anything that you guys get as excited about as John Rothstein does, counting down the hours until it's March?
Well, yeah, I agree with the people that say, the NCAA tournament's the greatest event, sports event anyway, because, it's spread out over several weeks and you've got, I don't even know how many games it is. I'm sure somebody smarter than me can figure it out, but, just dozens of games. And I mean, you think about the football, you got bowl season, which is fun. Of course, it's not quite the same as it was with the playoffs, but, bowl season's a fun thing. I still like, the bowls. And the college baseball tournament lasts a few weeks and leads into the College World Series, but I just don't think there's anything like March Madness when it comes to sports.
Yeah, Andrew, I guess it's got to be like a 30-song Zach Bryan album drop, right? Get you as pumped up as John is for March.
Yeah, I think the last time I was probably excited as he is for that would be when I had the Zach Bryan tickets at that Peacemaker Festival in Fort Smith. That was about my peak. So it's pretty intense.
That sounds like a good time. I think it's probably seeing Flatland for me, just either in Tulsa or Fayetteville. Yeah, it's a fun time of the year. I'd like to kind of poke fun at John. I always, on February 28th every year, especially I guess the last 3 years this year, I always tweet that meme out where there's that guy who, he's kind of trying to defend himself from getting stabbed by a guy with a knife. And John Rothstein is the guy with the knife as I'm trying to, ease my way into March. The last time we recorded, Arkansas was getting geared up for a road game at Alabama. Razorbacks lost 86-83 in Tuscaloosa, and then followed that up on Tuesday with I guess it was their biggest loss of the season margin-wise against Tennessee. It was 75-57. We won't spend just a whole lot of time on those two games because I think the magnitude of Saturday's game kind of takes precedence. But I think the thing that jumped out to me in those losses was the paint points that Arkansas allowed. I was pretty stunned, looking back through some of Mike Kaywood's game notes, and Bama scored 52 in the paint. And then on Tuesday, Tennessee really controlled the game around the rim, the restricted area, pretty much everywhere in the paint. They scored 42 points, had a plus 24 advantage. So that's 94 paint points that you've given up in the last two games. I don't know that I expected Arkansas to do that against any team. But I think it's just, Eric has talked about it. When I asked him about the paint points yesterday, he's like, well, look, you play in Alabama, really, really good three-point shooting team. And so you got to try to take away something. And so they tried to take away the three. I think they only gave up 3 threes, which is really good. You had to do that to stay in that game. Tennessee was kind of a different deal because they can shoot the three, but they're a great offensive rebounding team. I think they came into that game 5th in the country in offensive rebound rate on KenPom. But were you concerned, or are you concerned about how the around the rim game went for Arkansas in the last two games, considering, Eric said Oscar Tshiebwe might be the best offensive rebounder or rebounder period that college basketball's seen in the last decade. Going into this weekend, are you a little bit concerned about, just how things have gone in the lane?
Yeah, I think you got to be. I do think you have to put it in perspective and say that's Alabama and Tennessee, and they're two of the best teams in the country, and particularly, Alabama's really, really efficient on offense, and Tennessee's probably one of the most physical teams in the country. I mean, they have a senior night, and like half their team is getting honored.
Yeah.
And I know those guys aren't, going to be first round NBA draft picks, I don't think, but there's something to be said for having old, tough guys, and I think we've seen that in the past with Arkansas with guys like Justin Smith and Audice Toney and Stanley Amude and the Mitchell twins. I know the last couple of games have not been their finest hour, but I think they've given Arkansas quite a bit, and they're going to have to bring it on Saturday like they did in Lexington. Tshiebwe in the game in Walton Arena last year when Arkansas beat Kentucky, I think by 2 points. Tshiebwe had 30 points and 18 boards. Given the level of competition, it had to be one of his best games of his career, I would think.
Yeah, he was playing volleyball on the glass that whole day.
And the refs were letting him be pretty physical. That has something to do with it too. I'm not saying that they're calling it one way, but they're letting him play. And I think if they nobody wants to see Oscar. Well, maybe Arkansas fans do, but most people do not want to see Oscar Tshiebwe in foul trouble. He's an elite player, and people want to see him play. And same with the Razorbacks. So hopefully they'll won't call it super tight. I don't think anybody wants a free throw shooting contest. Arkansas hadn't shot free throws very well lately, anyway. But yeah, I think it's definitely an area of concern, especially with Kentucky coming to town, and that's something they've got to shore up. And they've had. That's one thing. It's tough to play a Saturday, Tuesday turnaround, especially on the road when you're playing Alabama, Tennessee. But one thing is Arkansas, that they got home late Tuesday, probably early Wednesday morning, probably, 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever it was. And then Kentucky had to play, a tough Vandy team that night and lost. And so I think that gives Arkansas a little bit of an advantage, is that they've had a little extra prep time,
Yeah, I think there's definitely a reason of concern, seeing how Arkansas has struggled with matching teams' physicality down the stretch. And looking back to even Mississippi State game where they just kind of got bullied on the inside. And I think that it's especially troubling when it's happening to a team where toughness is supposed to be kind of their calling card. And I remember early in the season when they were playing really physical, but they're getting called for a lot of fouls. Eric Musselman was asked, what can you do to kind of stop being called for so many fouls? And he said, well, we're not going to play any less physical. We're still going to play our brand of basketball, which is tough and in your face and physical. And the last few games or so, I think they've just kind of got out muscled. And you look at the first half of the Tennessee game, if my calculations are correct here, I have the Mitchell twins, Jalen Graham, Kamani Johnson, and Nick Smith Jr. combining for 2 rebounds in the first half and 39 combined minutes. And that's just not going to fly, especially when, those are all of your big men, and they grabbed 2 boards, and both of those, I believe, were Makai's. So the rest of that group had 0 rebounds. And that's just not going to fly if you want to match teams' physicality.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think I was a little bit surprised when you look at stat broadcast before the game, and in the past, like when Arkansas played Alabama the first time, and then when Arkansas has matched up with a team or played a team that's got, some pretty solid interior guys, you've more often than not seen Eric start both of the Mitchell twins, but he went with Jordan Walsh and Makai in the front court. And I was a little bit maybe surprised by that, because going in, that Tennessee is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. They're really tough. And I think, I don't know, I'm not trying to play coach here whatsoever. I'm not a coach for a reason, but I just think that I think maybe starting the Mitchell twins in that game, you maybe set more of a physical tone to where you're like sending a message to your guys is like, hey, this is like, we've got to hone in on the interior. Another thing that kind of stood out to me, I went back and rewatched the Arkansas Tennessee game, and it was interesting to see that Tennessee didn't really pick on any one Arkansas defender. it was kind of just like equal opportunity. I'm going to give you buckets type of game. Like I had not official by any means, but what I charted on my own in the rewatch was 6 Razorbacks gave up 3 buckets apiece, and then another one gave up 2, and they gave up 5 uncontested scores. So that was kind of interesting because I think in the past, like at Alabama, I think Ricky Council gave up 6 buckets, Devo gave up 5, which like you kind of expect that a little bit because Devo's matched up on Brandon Miller, but I think AB gave up 4 or 5 buckets too. So sometimes you can kind of see who opponents are going at, but it was just like I said, it was equal opportunity for Tennessee the other night. They got lots of good contributions from a lot of different guys. We talked to Eric Musselman, Kamani Johnson, and Anthony Black on Thursday ahead of the regular season finale on Saturday against Kentucky, which is they got back into the AP poll earlier this week at number 23, and then they lost at home to Vanderbilt. So not entirely sure still what to make of that Kentucky team. They've been really, really up and down. They'd won like 4 or 5 straight, I think, in the SEC before they lost the other night. So a little bit of a setback, but again, they lost Cason Wallace with like 18 minutes left in that game. So that's a pretty big blow. I listened to Calipari talk after that game, and he's like, when you lose Cason Wallace and you've already got your starting point guard out, like you're having to run offense and have it initiated by a 6'5" shooting guard. And then he said down the stretch, they had a 6'9" forward, Jacob Toppin, initiating too. So that's a kind of a tough spot for them to be in. I went into those interviews yesterday kind of looking, especially with the players, for what makes them confident that Arkansas can play well in March, and kind of make what they think will make them a tough out in the tournament. And I guess we'll play both sides of this coin. What makes you confident that Arkansas can beat, play some of its best basketball in March and be a tough out? And then what gives you some pause, I guess, as Kamani Johnson says, we're kind of getting into nut dropping time here.
Wow, I didn't know if you're going to bring that up, but
I couldn't help myself.
okay. Well, hopefully I thought this was a family podcast.
We'll put a PG-13 tag on this.
Yeah, I guess what gives me confidence is I still think Arkansas's got a lot of talent. Certainly getting Nick Smith back. Don't want to keep acting like he's LeBron James or something, but I just think the more he plays, the better it is for Arkansas. I mean, even in they got their butt kicked pretty good at Knoxville. He scored 13, I think. I think he scored 21, averaged 21 the last 3 games. So I think, the more he plays, just the better that is for him and for everybody getting used to each other. I think Anthony Black has played, to me, he's been Arkansas's MVP, best player, however you want to put it. And he got in foul trouble at Alabama and just really never seemed to get going. And then he had a rough game at Knoxville, 6 turnovers, and some of those is and he always takes responsibility, which I admire for a young player. But I think I don't think he's going to play. Those are probably the 2 worst games he's had, even though he had 13 against Tennessee. I guess Devo and him had 13. I think Nick had 12. But anyway, sorry about that. But I think AB is going to play better, and I think Nick's going to keep getting initiated. And I think getting Kamani back will help. He's a tough, physical, older guy. So I think that what makes you feel good is that they do have a lot of talent. They've still got several draft picks on this team, and Jordan Walsh, who's had flashes of really good play, if he could get back to playing like that, that would be huge. And then I think what gives you some pause is that as talented as they are, they're still really young. I mean, they're playing 3 true freshmen a lot of minutes. And a lot of these other guys, I think maybe the Mitchell twins, Maryland was an NCAA tournament team their freshman year, but they really didn't play much. So not much NCAA experience on this team outside of Devo. And then Kamani's played a little bit, but really Devo's the only guy on this team that's played serious minutes in the NCAA tournament. So that would just give me some pause there, I think.
Yeah, I think what makes me think that they can have a successful run is probably just how well they've played in big games against good teams, putting the Tennessee game aside, of course. Just they had Alabama on the ropes in Tuscaloosa. They had a chance to tie at the buzzer at Baylor. And I think, they seem to get up for the big games for the most part. And I think that's what you have to do in March. And if you subscribe to the theory that the best teams in March are the teams that haven't really hit their stride and haven't peaked too soon, I mean, that's Arkansas. I don't think they're a team that's figured out their best basketball yet. And so I think you could maybe see them put it all together. But as a reason for concern would be the inexperience, like Bob said, and really just their season-long trend of not being able to close out games. And that could be due to their inexperience, but it's been a problem all year long, and that definitely would give me a reason to pause.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's what I wrote. What gives me pause right now is it's a team that's struggled to close games, even the ones that they've won, like some of them, like the South Carolina game. You're up, what, 8 points? I think it was 8 points, maybe it was double figures, but you still had to sweat that one out at the end because of, turnovers, shot selection, lack of attention to detail on identifying shooters, and when the floor is broken, and just going under ball screens. Like, that's something Eric has tried to hammer home to these guys all year long. Like, we don't go under ball screens, especially when Michi Johnson is the guy that's got the basketball, or Brandon Miller's the one that's got the basketball. Not to compare those two guys, but they both burned Arkansas when they went under ball screens. You just can't do that. And I just wonder if they're going to be able to handle the emotions that come with games where, like, everything is on the line. You know what I mean? And if Arkansas grabs a lead, can it make those plays, to hang on in advance? And I keep saying, and when I'm in this pause section, I just think there's a lot of things that can give you pause. And it's like, another one is, can they withstand a run that inevitably comes and be able to punch back? I don't think that we've seen just a ton of that this year. I keep going back to the first round game when we were in Buffalo last year, and Arkansas seems like they've got a lead. It's like probably 6 to 8 points a lot of the game, may have even snuck into double figures. And then Vermont just decides to start knocking shots down, and Ryan Davis gets going, and there's a lower seeded team, giving you everything they've got. And then everybody in the building is on Vermont side. And now you've got to not only overcome, what Vermont is doing, but you got to handle the emotions of kind of like everybody being against you, and then still find a way to make some plays. I think if there's anything that gives me some confidence, it's that Arkansas has been a pretty good defensive team all year. I think they're 11th in the country in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom, and they've lost 4 games this year where they've, given up 70 points or less. Like, that's on the offense, to be real honest. Like, you hold Baylor to 67 points. That's not a very good defensive team, or not a great defensive team like they have been in the past. You got to find a way to manufacture some points. And, in the last couple games too, their 3-point defense has been really solid. I mean, I know it's like Eric said, it's one of those deals where you kind of pick your poison. Are we going to let them, we're going to take our chances with the 3 ball, or we're going to kind of funnel those guys in to our bigs? And they held Alabama and Tennessee to 7 of 38 from deep. I don't know. There's 2 teams that have held. I don't know if there's teams in the league that have held those 2 teams down from 3 like that. And I think the Mitchells also give me a little bit of confidence when they're engaged, and when they're just kind of like acting like bullies around the rim. Like, that's what Arkansas needs them to be. And that's part of the reason, like, Eric saw what Mark Williams did in the NCAA tournament last year, and he was like, I'm going to go get me some guys that are mean around the rim and have a little bit of bully in them. I think that's a very long-winded way to say I don't really know, but there's reasons on both sides. I think I definitely understand the pause. I'm kind of there right now. I don't know if it's just a result of the way the last 2 games have gone, and the fact that you're playing another ranked team this weekend. Still a lot to play for, so it's going to be interesting to see how this weekend goes, and where Arkansas's head is going into the postseason. The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is sponsored by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers, or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Wanted to get into Kentucky a little bit before we give some keys to an Arkansas win on Saturday. And I guess I don't really know that y'all may have something to add to this, but it's kind of just more of a kind of an injury rundown on Kentucky. Cason Wallace left Wednesday's game against Vanderbilt. He tweaked his ankle with about 18 minutes left, ended up leaving the game. Cal said, and then Eric repeated when I asked him if he expected Cason Wallace to play. Like I knew what Cal said. I just wanted to, just kind of give the latest on what Arkansas was thinking, or get that. Cal said that Cason Wallace is fine. There wasn't any swelling in his ankle, but he also said he didn't really know. But I mean, that's kind of in the immediate aftermath, in terms of a loss, and you never know. You really got to wait till the next day, really, to see how an ankle is going to react. But Sahvir Wheeler's not going to play in this game either. He missed the first game against Arkansas. I think he was battling an ankle injury. I think that was the first game that he'd missed with that ankle injury. And then on Wednesday, Cal said that he had kind of an unrelated operation. So it seems like he's going to be out for a couple weeks. But I guess just with Cason Wallace, we're probably all expecting him to play Saturday, right? Like, what are the challenges when you defend him? Because I've been really, really, really impressed with him. He's kind of like the type of player that Eric, I think, would run a lot of offense through if he was here. And if they don't have Cason Wallace, I think they're in a world of trouble in terms of initiating offense and stuff like that. But what do y'all think? What do y'all think about Cason Wallace and just the kind of, I guess, the challenges that he can present to a defense?
Yeah, I think he scored 24 points against Arkansas. I mean, Arkansas beat Kentucky, I think it was 88-73, so pretty decisively, but Wallace was definitely a bright spot for the Cats, and he has been all season. I mean, I think he's a first-round draft pick, one and done guy, and he's got good length. He's a pretty good shooter, but to me, he just has a scoring mentality, and that's something that Kentucky needs, because they usually have a pretty small rotation, especially take Wheeler out of there. He's missed several games now, so I guess they've gotten a little used to that. But to me, Wallace is he's their best offensive player. He's a versatile guy. He can be a tough matchup with what he can do at his size. And so that would be a huge loss if he hadn't able to play. And, no offense to Vanderbilt, if he doesn't get hurt, my guess is Kentucky, comes back and wins that game or hangs on at the end, or however you want to put it,
Yeah, I think the key is staying in front of him and not letting him penetrate as well as he did. It seemed like they struggled guarding the dribble drive against Tennessee as well, so that's something they're going to have to improve on fairly quickly. And it'll be interesting to see if he doesn't play, because I think Kentucky will be in a world of trouble, because last time they played Arkansas, they only used a 7-man rotation, and that was with Wallace in the game. And so if he's not playing, then it's like, who do you go to? I mean, they don't have a bunch of proven guys that they can turn to at that point. And I think Arkansas is going to obviously key in on Tshiebwe again, and whether or not you can replicate the success that they had on him will be seen. But I mean, he's obviously got to be the focus of the scouting report, whether or not Wallace plays.
Speaking of the scouting report, do you remember when Arkansas went to Kentucky last time? I think it was Matt Jones with Kentucky Sports Radio. He tweeted a picture of the cover of Arkansas scouting report for Kentucky. So that's kind of interesting. Who knows what happened with that after he found it, or if it made its way to Kentucky at all. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, Arkansas scout for Kentucky's in the state of Kentucky.
And I gotta imagine somebody got in some trouble for leaving that behind.
I would imagine too. I kind of wanted to ask about that, but you never know how that would turn out. But I think Cason Wallace will play. I think it's one of those showcase games for not only Arkansas but Kentucky too. Like, they're trying to, I think, cement their place in the tournament field. And if they don't have Casey Wallace, that probably takes maybe their best defender off the floor too. Like, he's a great scorer, great offense initiator too. But he can be really agitating on the defensive end because he's got really good length and really good size, and he runs the floor so well. I mean, you would expect that from, a guy of his caliber. I think we all understand the key when you play Kentucky is being able to handle Oscar Tshiebwe as best you can. It was really interesting looking at his game log since Arkansas played Kentucky last. He's averaged 20.3 points and 12.2 boards in the 6 games since Arkansas played him. Arkansas held him to 7-7, like literally cut his production in half based on his averages. Can Arkansas replicate what it did in Rupp with him? And if they can, what all does that entail? Is it the Mitchells? I think a kind of an under the radar key is just Arkansas being able to throw a little bit of additional help at him from a guy who's defending a player who might not be the biggest offensive threat.
Yeah, I don't know if they can hold them to 7-7 again, but Arkansas, as you said earlier, they have been an elite defensive team most of the season, and that entails maybe they should put Devo on. I mean, we talked about Devo being their lockdown defender. We know he's covered, Gigi Jackson, who's 6'9", and Brandon Miller is 6'9", and heck, she weighs 6'9" too, right? But he's like 100 pounds heavier than those two guys, and they're more perimeter, I would call finesse players, and obviously Tshiebwe, there's nothing finesse about that guy, But I was just kidding there. But yeah, I think it helps that I would imagine the Twins are going to be pretty motivated because they know they had a good game against them last time. They know they did not play well at Tennessee, and Arkansas really had zero inside game, honestly. And so I think they'll be very motivated. And Kamani's back, and he's at least well enough to play. I bet that toe doesn't feel great, but he said he heard it at South Carolina, and he, you think about that, he hadn't played a lot since then until the other night. So, and then if they get Jalen Graham, I mean, he's got skills, so there's 4 big guys they can throw at Tshiebwe. That's 20 fouls. Not saying they want to foul him 20 times, but that's a lot of fouls. You can get some help from some of your guards. I think with him, it's a team effort. And so I think Arkansas can put together a really good defensive game plan against them. It's obviously got to be a little bit different because, Kentucky, I'm sure, is going to change up some things or react to some things that Arkansas did well the last time. But I think they can hold them under 30 anyway. I mean, like I say, the last time he was in that building, he scored 30. I don't think he'll get 30 again, but he's obviously the key to Kentucky.
Why do we think the Mitchells had so much success with him last time? Is it because he's like a true, I mean, I know that he can get up and he can throw it down like when he's got some space, but it seems like a lot of his game is below the rim. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not trying to dunk it on you all the time. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely a physicality aspect to his game, especially on the glass, but he's so good. He's really interesting for me to watch because he doesn't always play above the rim, like I mentioned. Like, he's really good about carving out space for himself. But the kid's got really good fit. Like, he can, his second, third, and fourth jumps, I mean, he can probably jump 4 times where I could twice. Like, he's super impressive. And then watching him run the floor, it almost reminds me of Roadrunner. Like, he's just on his tiptoes and he's running with it's going to sound really weird, but it's like perfect posture when he runs down the floor, and he just moves. But why do you think the Mitchells had success with him? Was it just discipline on their part to just not leave the floor until he did, or what do you think was the key there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. I think they had good verticality, as Eric likes to say. They were able to play good defense without fouling them a lot. I think a lot of what happens Saturday is going to be how tight things are called or how much they let them play. And like I said, I'd rather see them let them play on both ends. But you're right, Tshiebwe, he's not a guy that has a lot of block shots. I think maybe he's got 20 block shots, something like that. I think for the first Arkansas game, he had 18 or 19. Because I remember looking it up and thinking, wow, I would have thought he had more. But you're right, he's not a guy that's going to sky. He's just very efficient. Like you say, has good footwork. And maybe the Mitchells gained confidence and maybe Oscar lost some, even as good as he is, because he'd only scored 4 points the previous game against
That's
Florida.
true. Yeah.
I remember thinking, wow, this guy's going to come out like a house on fire. And then, he only scored 7, which is obviously better than 4, but still way below. And then, like you pointed out, he's been on fire since then. But that was just a game where a lot of things were going right for the Razorbacks. And I think as you play like that, you just gain confidence, whether it's, AB getting steals, making a lot of passes, or the Mitchells. And so I think even coming off a rough game at Tennessee, they need to come into this game. They realizing what they did at Lexington and having some confidence and, just, bringing positive vibes, I guess, like maybe Ricky Council was talking about after the game, just bringing a good positive attitude into that game.
Yeah, I think Oscar Tshiebwe did as much to help Arkansas contain him as the Mitchell twins did. I think he was maybe a little more passive than he should have been on the offensive end, and maybe that was because of his previous struggles coming into that game, and his confidence maybe might have been wavering. And I think there was a sequence where one of the Mitchell twins blocked him twice in like the same possession. And I think
that was a great stretch from Mikel. Yeah,
that's probably a real confidence beater. So that probably took him down a notch. But I think he might have been in his own head at that point. And I don't expect that Arkansas will hold him to 7-7 again. And I think if without Wheeler and potentially without Wallace, that Kentucky's just going to have to live and die through Oscar Tshiebwe. And much like if you guys watched the Michigan-Illinois game last night, Hunter Dickinson got the ball every time for Michigan, and they just, like, you knew he was getting the ball, and it was just, can you stop him? And I think that then they're going to have to do that in the same vein.
Is there a stat line Arkansas has to keep him to feel good? I think I'm at like 15-15, which sounds absolutely nuts, right? Like exactly, or pretty much double what he did last time. But I think if Arkansas keeps him, I don't know about 15-15, but if you could keep him to, I don't know, 12 or 14, and then like make sure that he's absolutely not a monster on the glass, I think Arkansas probably feel pretty good about their chances. I don't know how many people would agree with this, but he's not the only player on their team, on Kentucky's team. Mm-hmm. What are some keys or some things that you guys are going to be watching for outside of the Tshiebwe Mitchell, the Mitchells matchup?
Well, Reeves is a really good, has been a really good scorer for them, and he may have to take up more of that. Especially if Wallace doesn't play, he's going to have to. But he's been, a pretty effective scorer for him. And I'm getting back to Oscar for a minute. If you told me, if I'm Arkansas and you told me he's going to get 15, I'd take that now. 15. Okay, fine.
Yeah, the dude just went for 20 and 20 the other night.
Yeah, I would definitely take. And plus, I'm sure he's going to be ultra motivated for this game. After what Arkansas did to him the last time, and remembering what he did in Walton Arena, my guess is he'll come out. And then, guys, I'm having a brain break. Who's there? A 3-point shooter, the transfer from Iowa.
Oh, is it CJ Frederick?
Yeah, Frederick. He was a guy that I just thought he took too many shots last time. I remember thinking, wow, that's good for Arkansas. Guy. And I know he's an elite 3-point shooter. I think he was a little banged up from what Cal said. And so assuming he's healthy, he's a guy, I mean, he's like a 45% 3-point shooter career-wise. He was a really good 3-point shooter at Iowa. And he's had his moments for Kentucky. So I think he's a guy that you got to be wary of if getting off. So, and that's obviously going to help Oscar a lot inside if Kentucky can get, they're not really a 3-point shooting team. They're kind of like Arkansas. If they're doing a bunch of 3-pointers, that's probably a bad sign. But if they're hot, that could be an equalizer, in Walton Arena.
Kind of get Tyler Hero vibes from CJ Frederick. Anybody else? I think a couple of things I'm watching for is it's Devo and Jordan Walsh. I mean, talked to Eric on Thursday, and he just like not very often will he just be like, we need this guy to bring energy, right? Like normally it's a total team deal. But Jordan went for 13 against Kentucky at Rupp, and I don't think he's cracked double figures since then. So I think his energy is going to be really important. Defensively, I think he's been pretty good the last couple of games. I think Alabama was like 2 of 12 from the floor against him, so he was phenomenal. He was lights out in that game. I think he got some disadvantageous switches at Tennessee, and he gave up a couple buckets. I remember he got matched up on Plavsic one time, and that's just a matchup that you don't want. But Devo, I think, has been flying under the radar a little bit the last couple games. He went for a season high 21 at Alabama, and he's 6 of his last 11 from 3, just 2 turnovers in the last 78 minutes too. So I think Arkansas needs that version of him again this weekend. He was really, really good at Kentucky. I think he had maybe matched a season high or had a season high with 7 assists then too. So he played his role great in that game. Did a pretty good job defensively too. I think lastly for me, it's Arkansas defending Cason Wallace well when he's the handler in pick and roll. And I'm not like a Kentucky expert, but they run this quick hitter where he swings the ball to one side of the floor. More often than not, it's to the left side. Swing it back to him. When he catches, there's a ball screen for him at the top of the key, runs off of it to the right a lot, and he gets to the mid-range part of the floor. And I think, one, that's a pretty ideal shot for him. They can knock down at a high rate. And secondly, he's like really crafty, picking up the dribble at like the elbow area and shot faking his defender off the floor, letting them fly by, and then he's got a pretty clean look. I think Arkansas's got to do a really good job on him, when he's the handler and some pick and roll stuff. And their rearview mirror defense, like Eric has said in the past, that's got to be, I think they got to be really locked in there. I know those are pretty awfully specific example, but I think Kentucky gets really good looks when they do that. And I think you got to make him, pick up his dribble and maybe have to spit it out to a guy that, maybe he's not as capable of creating offense for himself. I think Arkansas might be okay. Arkansas, Kentucky set for a 1:00 tip-off on CBS on Saturday. Should be a fun game. No shortage of energy in the building type of environment, I would imagine. And I looked at Eric's Instagram story on Thursday. It looks like Sharkansas will be making an appearance in the whiteout. So going to be a really, really fun way to cap the regular season, a game that feels like both of these teams really need. Arkansas wins, they get to 20 for the season. So might be a big confidence building game if they can get a win here. We'll be back next week, possibly early on, because we'll know who Arkansas will play in the SEC tournament, know what's kind of on the line, have a little bit more clarity as far as the NCAA tournament. For Andrew Joseph and Bob Holt, I'm Scotty Bordelon. We appreciate you listening in, and we'll holler at you again next week.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.